Yeah, so welcome to the Shift
I
podcast.
appreciate that. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
Yeah, I saw you at an event that Kamina, of course, put together, Human
Hmm.
Options, and so shout out to her for just bringing all the right people in all the right
Yeah.
places. But and I appreciated the how real you kept it with the audience. So it was obviously the audience of kind of fresh graduates and early career folks, and you were moderating the wonderful panel. And I was like, I gotta talk to him. I was like, he just keeps it so real and he's so authentic. And I was like, we're gonna have a great conversation. So that's kind of what inspired me to be here with you today. But I want you to take me a little bit through your career story. So
Okay.
take me back. What got you into journalism? What has, growing up in North Philadelphia, kind of, was there any influence from that side in terms of like wanting to be into journalism and media and kind of telling the stories that are out there? And take me up to today.
Well, again, thank you for having me, Elena. And man, that human up that was last year, literally,
It
right?
was
Because we're
literally
it
last year because
was
it's
literally
January
last
now.
year, right?
Yeah.
But listen, you take it back from the very beginning, and that is I grew up growing up in North Philadelphia. My dad was an executive at the gas company. My mom was pretty much a stay at home mom. Had her side jobs, here and there. Growing up in North Philadelphia, you're just trying to find your way. You know,
Mm,
you there's a lot of things that can take you left and right. It's predominantly urban area, black family, not dirt poor, but middle class slash lower middle class. But my dad in the third grade, I think he made a decision that kind of changed the trajectory of my life, and is that he put us in a busing program, and that bussed us from the area schools in North Philadelphia, which were still kind of going through their progression, getting computers in the classrooms and things of that nature, but up in the northeast section of the neighborhood, which was probably more upper class, middle upper class, and um, you know, we got bused to school every day. And so, that you get there and as a kid, all I hear is the word North. I'm thinking I'm gonna get bused to the North Pole. I'm like, oh man, I'm going to school with Santa. But you don't realize that you're going and you see all of these different, backgrounds that's different from your own. Seeing white kids, Asian kids, and it's different from the neighborhood I grew up in. But you're seeing the difference between night and day almost because I'm going home every single day to this, area of which again people might consider the hood, you know what
mm-hmm.
I mean, in North Philadelphia. And I'm getting bused to school up in this nicer area every day. And so it's like I'm going back and forth and
Mm,
seeing two different worlds. And it's like, man, I don't want this. I want that. Because, up there, the houses are nicer, the neighborhoods are nicer. Any kid wants to grow up in a good environment. So it's messing with you psychologically, because you're trying to figure out, I don't want to stay here the rest of my life. I don't want to go there, and be looked upon as a person who left his community and went all the way up there. So you're trying to figure it out. But I
mm,
stayed up there throughout high school and stayed in that particular area. So every day I'm getting either you take the school bus, you take public transportation. But I started to develop friends up there. So I didn't want to leave my friends. So I just stayed up in that way. So, you're getting bused at school. And so I'm a knucklehead, in high school. I'm kind of almost like you. In high school you couldn't figure it out, right? You're
I was
trying
a
to
mess.
yeah, you're trying to figure it out. You want to, and then, I know it was a culture shock for you because you moved from Russia at age
Mm-hmm.
13.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're trying to figure it out. And then in the seventh grade, another turning point happened. My dad decided to leave me back in the seventh grade intentionally. He
Mm,
didn't feel I learned enough. He didn't feel that the grades that I was bringing home justified me moving on. And he was probably right. At the time, I hated him. Are you serious? You're going to set me back socially, right? Because nobody had never heard of people getting left back.
yeah.
So I remember the school made a deal. They said, well, if you can prove for the first semester of seventh grade that you can hold the grades and we'll keep you there. And if not, we're gonna put you back. My dad's like, okay, cool. That is a deal. Great. I'm still a knucklehead. I mean, I'm getting to class. I'm not paying attention. I'm worried about the girls. And the grades reflected. And, I got left back. So I'm going throughout middle school, and my friends are like, hey, man, you were just in our class. Where are you? And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, they put me in this special section. You're trying to, get through it. And then, you just got to come to the realization that you get left back. But so that, it kind of sets you in a different course. But I'm still a knucklehead in a way, but I'm a better knucklehead because entering high school, I'm taking school a little bit more seriously, but I'm still not taking it seriously enough where you're taking the SATs or getting a high score. And you're just still kind of like, all right, I want to go to college. I'm tired of high school.
Hmm.
Um, and so, you get to a point where you get out of, out of high school and you're trying to figure it out. I too, like you, go to community college. I almost flunk out of community college. Now, how can you flunk out of community college, right? Like,
You and I both.
right? It's like they call it 13th grade, right?
Yeah.
So how can you? But again, it's because it's a lack of focus, it's a lack of awareness, it's a lack of I don't still know what I want to do.
Hmm.
I start to develop a passion for writing because by this time I know I'm not going to the NBA, right? My grades, I'm not going to get, but I know I wanted to cover sports, and I started to develop a passion for writing. And at this time, you're seeing a lot of black journalists on television. You're seeing guys like Stephen A. Smith, Michael Wilbon, J.A. Dinde, a whole bunch of others. And I'm looking up and I'm seeing these guys on the ESPN. And I want to do that, but I need a college education, right? And I'm working at a car dealership, Toyota, in Devon, PA at the time, cleaning floors and mopping, and so I decided, okay, listen, this is fun, but I want to do this the rest of my life. I don't want to be wearing a uniform. For some people, it's great; they love it, but I just don't want to be doing this. I want to be like those guys I see on TV. So I go back to community college, ace it, get transferred to Temple University, and from there, it's like you're entering the professional field, and you got to sink or swim. So I guess I did a good job at swimming.
We're gonna talk more about that swimming. It's so relatable. Yeah, it's I think a lot of young people today feel so pressured to have it figured out,
Yeah.
and it's just like you're not going to. And I have a lot of conversation. I'm in talent development field right now, and I have a lot of conversations around like growing managers and certain like young people into management positions, so on. And I always say like there's just a process and it takes time. Like there's a process that takes time. You have to go through some of the experiences. I don't care if you're 25 and like the brightest person in the world. That's very rare to have like somebody who's 25 and is like just a genius level, who's ready to lead teams. Most of the times it just takes years of experience because you just don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And it's it takes that going through the process, like I like to refer to it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of young people I talk to today, and even like mid-level professionals who are just trying to get somewhere, but it's like don't be in so much of a hurry. Like maybe trust that process. But I'm curious, because you mentioned like you grew up in different parts of Philadelphia, and then you saw that there was this different way of living.
Yeah.
And I'm a true believer that we need to be able to see certain things. We need to bring awareness, because otherwise it's like we're walking around with blinders on our eyes.
Yep.
Because if you don't know, like again, going back to I love the saying, like we don't know what we don't know, and if you don't see the possibilities, you almost don't know it exists. I mean, you might see it, and especially back then, there was no social media to even see, right?
So it was MySpace, but it wasn't developed.
Yeah, I mean, MySpace was a different, completely different. But it's I'm just curious, like, do how much has you've talked a little bit about how it influenced your decision to be like, okay, there's a different life.
Yeah.
How much do you think environment influences decisions later on in life? Like, do you believe in that, or do you think it's just because you have a lot, like there are a lot of people who just come out from different parts and maybe they never see it? Like, what do you think it is when it comes to people who kind of reach their career success, people who don't? Do you think it's environment? Do you think it's upbringing?
I think it's a mixture of first of all, yes, you're 100% right. Environment does play a part of it. The other side of that is that I'm coming to North Philadelphia, and I'm going to the Northeast, and that's just high school. But then I'm leaving the Northeast, which again is a pretty cool neighborhood, and I'm commuting to Devon, Pennsylvania. Now, where is Devon, Pennsylvania? One of the richest areas in all of the United States. A lot of billionaires live in Devon, Pennsylvania. Now, I don't know this at the time. All I know is my dad bought his car from Toyota dealership up there. It's pretty nice. They know him. Through essence, they know me. I can get a job. But, traveling different parts of the state, and you're seeing where I live in, right, which is not the best neighborhood, right? I'm sure it's not the worst in all of the world, but it's certainly not the best from where my background was. And then going up into, again, this upper middle class area, and then going up into a ultra rich area. So I'm seeing the three different worlds. And, it's almost like a fork in the road. Which I don't want to be here the rest of my life. That seemed cool, but that over there is phenomenal. Look at those houses. Look at these driveways. Look at a Friday night. I'm driving down, having to, go through these areas to go on the highway to go back to my community. But I'm driving through these communities where these kids are just sitting out and having popcorn on a Friday night and in front of the movie theater, ice cream shop right there. And I'm like, this is not my world. This is my world. And so, you kind of are thinking like it's almost like Dennis the Menace, Good Times, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Good Times, the Cosby Show. Like, you just see 3 different worlds, and it inspires you to just want more. Because yeah, you're right. I could see it and go flip through a magazine, and trust me, I did that, right? During my high school years when I go downtown and they had a board of Tower Records was still around at that point. Going through, flipping through the magazines, Forbes. Didn't know I'll be writing for them one day, but you're flipping through and you see it. But when you actually see the houses in front of you, there were times when I was working at Toyota, I would take one of the cars to shuttle and just go around the neighborhood and just sit out front of people's driveway and just stare at their houses. Man, I hope they don't call the cops on me. I wanted to just sit there and visualize myself coming off of those lawns, because these were humongous houses. They were nice. Who wouldn't want to live in a nice area like this? And it does instill a fire and a drive in you, because at times when you may be lackadaisical, you sit back and you think like, wait a minute, remember those houses? These people didn't get here not working hard. They didn't get here and didn't get these houses by not, sure, some of them maybe, but for the most part, these look like people that worked their behinds off to get to where they are. And so, you got to continue to work hard to get one of those houses. And so, yeah, the environments that I was seeing at that time in my upbringing certainly did shift my thinking, because, every Saturday, instead of hanging around North Philadelphia with my friends, and I could have been doing that at the barbershop, and sometimes I was, but I was also getting up in the morning, driving all the way up to Devon, PA, more than 25 miles to go work. And there you just, you see working class men, you see working class people, you see car technicians, you see mechanics, and you see salesmen, and you learn the essence of just how to work hard, right? How to talk in customer service. You experienced that when you were a waitress in that Subway, right? You're getting all these different lessons of how to deal with human beings. You don't know you're getting it at the time, but you're getting it. And when I look back on it, I'm like, man, that working at that car dealership, going to that high school, and being where I'm from, it was all connected. But you got to look up and you got to see it. And, I'm a big believer in visualizing and the universe connecting. And so I just used to go outside of those homes and just sit and watch and want to have them one day. And again, I think that definitely kept the fire and the fuel lit, as I was going through my career.
That's such gold, because there's so many people, young people, again, graduating from college, and I'm doing a lot of work with youth these days and fresh graduates, and they underestimate the power of these jobs.
Yeah.
The power of, because everybody wants to get into that office job, and everybody wants to be famous, or, they want to be social media stars and so on. But it's like the power and the benefit of having those just regular working class jobs that are so amazing, because they prep you for the world like nothing else. No corporate job is ever going to do it, and you see big difference. I see a lot of big difference in the corporate world for people who have had other experiences before college, and those that just went to college and went to a nice fancy corporate job. World of a difference in terms of their grits, resilience, creativity, customer service, basic relationship building skills. World of a difference. It's phenomenal.
And it teaches, the value of hard work. I remember, those were some of the best experiences that I've had in my upbringing, working at that car dealership. You didn't realize it at the time, but, at nighttime, I had a responsibility. My responsibility is that when those car technicians came in the next day, the place was clean, so they can clean people's cars without having to worry about an oil spot on the floor and them slipping, and now a person's car can't get fixed in a good time, right? You feel a part of something, and when those guys, those technicians appreciated it when they came around, hey Jabari, hey man, you gonna take care of my baby for me tonight? Like, you feel a sense of, and so you took it upon yourself that, what, this ain't the best job in the world, and it's nasty oil water, you gotta take it over, cleaning trash up and all that stuff. And if it's a cold day like we're experiencing in New York, you got to take that trash outside. And then when it's snowing, you got to go outside and shovel the customers' cars out, right?
Yeah.
This is hard work. And you appreciate it. And it, like I said, it just gives you that work ethic that, has helped me out a lot in my professional career.
So it's great. You had that drive, you had that vision. You knew what you didn't want, at least, right? You had an idea of maybe what you wanted. You went to school. You kind of took the right steps, but I'm sure it took a lot more than that. I'm sure it wasn't like a smooth sailing kind of journey. So First question I have around that is, what has been the biggest surprise for you, or like a shocker that when you got into media in particular and you start doing, getting into the field and you're like, oh, I didn't expect this. Was there like any surprises that you like had I don't know, another thought about how it should go or how it should be, and then you're like, oh, that's a shocker.
I wouldn't say it was a shocker, but what we're doing now, the podcast game. When I was young, working in weekly newspaper, mainline Life, mainline Times at the point, it was in suburban Philadelphia. So here you are, this same young kid working at the Devon, PA, car dealership now has to cover that territory because that particular suburban newspaper covered that, suburb. So I'm going up and down at these high schools, but you know, I too started doing a podcast,
Mm-hmm.
using the audacity to cut it up,
Mm-hmm.
figuring it out, sitting in my living room, taking the audio, a little recorder, and then taking that audio out of the USB drive, transferring the audio over. And I'm having fun because I'm learning how to use a different audio program. Now, video is not included. Final Cut is around, but technology is not advanced at that point. But to see where it is today, I almost get mad at myself. Like, man, if I'd have just kept that podcast going, imagine all the people I would have had by then. Because I was,
Yeah.
and then I tried it again. When I was covering the Blazers in Portland with a friend of mine, and you're just you're experimenting. You're throwing stuff against the wall, trying to figure it out. But in order to do podcasts, so I respect someone like yourself, you need to be consistent. You need to make sure that you're on a schedule. You need to make sure that you got to build audience. So to see where it is today and to see that how I was dabbling around with it as a little kid, in my living room, when I was a weekly sports, reporter, and to see where it's evolved to now, that certainly is it's surprising, not shocking, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also pretty dope.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to see that there's a different field out there where people can go and make a lucrative amount of money.
Yeah, I think this podcast was like a surprise to a lot of people because
Yeah,
even the radio folks, like they were like, "Oh, this is never gonna go," you know what I
yeah.
mean? And then like it just blew up
I
to
mean, listen, I
crazy.
hardly now when I'm in my car, I probably listen to NPR most of the time. But when I want to get a sense or a feel of how people are feeling, I turn on sports radio. But for the most part, that's only in my car. When
Mm-hmm.
I'm in my house, I'm on a train. Now that we have phones, everything is podcast.
Yeah. What's been the biggest challenge in your career so far?
Oh man, the adjustment periods, moving. I remember leaving Philadelphia in 2013, and at that point, I had just had my first and only daughter, and only child that I know of. I kid you, I kidding. Um, but yeah, she's born, and then you get an opportunity to go and have the biggest job of your career, your
Mm-hmm.
big break, and you have a decision to make. Do you stay and stay working at the car dealership, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stay working at the I was working also at a TV station at the time as a production assistant,
Mm-hmm.
and see your daughter, or do you take this opportunity because you want to invest in her future? And I took the latter, but you miss. Now I've never missed holidays, but you miss those day to day. You miss the Tuesdays when she's wanting to walk, or maybe her mom is tired and I want to give her some relief or whatever like that. You miss those days, and so it was a challenge at first because you don't know how you're gonna. Uh, it's just my first child,
Yeah.
and and so I want to make sure that I'm there, and it's a girl too, girl dad. I want to
Yeah,
make sure
yeah.
I'm around. And so that was challenging, being gone the first 5 years of her life, but not around daily, because I was living in San Antonio, living in Portland, covering two teams and covering the league, and that was a challenge. I got
Mm-hmm.
used to it, but it was always a challenge. Like on that Wednesday when I didn't have anything to do, you just want to maybe play with your daughter and you can't.
Mm-hmm. I whenever I speak with people that kind of have successful careers, or just not even, it's just a career in general and like a family life, it's always like they just feel guilty. It's just guilt. You feel guilty when you're at work because you're not with your kids, and then when you're with kids, you feel guilty because you should be working on your career,
Yeah,
but you're not. So I think it's just like a parent guilt, no matter
yeah,
where you are. I think it's just the reality.
yeah. And like I said, I remember calling my aunt one of the first nights I was in San Antonio, just crying, tears,
Mm-hmm.
like just like because I didn't know how I was gonna handle it. Like this is a culture shock. I'm living in San Antonio, but you figure it out, and again you got to overcome that challenge. One of my favorite books is Peaks and Valleys by Spencer Johnson, and it teaches you, you may get to the peak very fast at first, but if you do that, you're missing the tools that you collect along the way, the wisdom, the experience. You collect those things along the way. That's going to keep you at the top of that peak. If you go too fast and you don't collect those tools when you get to the top of the peak, can you stay there?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And most people, they can't because they haven't collected the tools that they need to stay there. And that book kind of teaches you how to do that. And so, I appreciate that challenge and then figuring it out. But it was also, I realized, okay, I'm going to the peak, but I got to take my time. But yeah, it was a challenge getting without my daughter.
It's because people didn't go through the process. That's what I keep going back to the
Yeah.
process. And honestly, I mean, I've realized this just in the last couple of years. I used to be I'm still very like ambitious and, and I like to just get things done and so on. But I remember I was just so chasing something all the time.
Yeah.
And when I had my first business in 2019, and I was always like trying to like chase things. And then, you get to a point, I don't know if I'm just getting older now, like I'm 38, gonna be 39 this summer. So it's like, I don't know if it's age or if it's just like you realize that just the process is the fun part. Like maybe that's what it's so that way I'm like, okay, like I'll get there. Like I literally have this conversation. I'm like, okay, I'll get there. And then like what is the actual thing? But I'm like, no, I actually enjoy this. Like this is the part I enjoy. Do you know what I'm saying? Because once you get like to a certain level, you're like, okay, I'm comfortable enough. Like I can pay my bills.
Yeah.
You can pay your bills and etc. And then you just gotta learn to enjoy the process. And it's just about time. To your point, like consistency. Staying true to your values. I think is another big lesson that kind of I've learned along the way. But it's just I this is a lot on my mind recently. But I don't know again because I'm just getting older. I mean, obviously I'm still
There's no
young,
such thing
but
as old, well
not
developed.
old. I don't know what's, but I think it's just like there's something around going closer to 40s.
Yeah.
Because then you kind of almost have some things figured out, not everything, but you kind of feel like you do versus like in your 30s, you're just a hot mess still. You know what I mean? So,
Well, a friend of mine told me when you get to your 40s, most people, athletes probably are excluded from this because, their bodies go through a different phase when you're competing at the highest level. But most people, when you get to your 40s, those are your golden years, your prime years. You look at a lot of entrepreneurs who didn't make it until they were in their 40s, maybe 50s. And so I'm 41 now. I'm embracing it. It's like, if this is my final 10 before you get to the 50, the back half, then like, you got to kind of embrace it. So, but yes, you soak up a lot of wisdom when you're 30. So that way you can know, because when you get to your 40s, the mistakes that you can make in your 20s and 30s, they become a little more intense if you make them. And the consequences seem to be more severe and you can't overcome them as quickly, and so you have to really learn not to repeat those same mistakes. So the 40s is a challenge because the temptations are there, right? They really are.
Yeah, but you know better.
But with some cases, you know better. Some cases, you know better.
Hopefully you know better by then, yeah.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, my dad, and maybe that's part of where it comes from for me, is when I used to drill, life starts at 40.
Yes.
I don't know what it was like. He was always like, life starts at 40.
Yeah.
And I really always like look so forward to it. It's so it's I'm excited for the 40s for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm a little depressed in a way too, in a good way, not in a bad, in a horrible way. But because you just realize as I see my daughter evolve. Nas, hip hop rapper right now, he has a song, once a man, twice a child. And that is like, okay, you're born into this world a child, and as you evolve in life, you get old enough, and you maybe get to a place where maybe your kids have to start taking care of you. Right. And so, it's like now I'm thinking, you know what? I know I wanted that burger from McDonald's. Let me just not eat it, right? Because I don't want to have to put a burden, and so you try to make better decisions with your health and your eating as well.
Yeah.
When you're in your 40s. So, but I can tell you, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. So, come over to the club. Can't wait to have it.
Yeah. It's a good time. So don't be afraid if you're getting older. That's great. So I want to talk a little bit about some of your kind of passion projects. So one of the things that you're working on right now is Forbes Black.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that and like what's, because you're the one kind of behind it and leading on a lot of it. So talk to me a little bit about how that came about.
Well, I mean, listen, it came about it was organic in a way. And so, fast, in 2013, when I get an opportunity to go cover the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA, that was big for me because here it is, this respected franchise of in all of sports with Greg Popovich, Tony Parker, Tim Duncan, Miles Ginobili, a young up and coming Kawhi Leonard, and all the other legendary players and young guys around him. So as a young journalist, you go down there and you're getting a sense of how it all works, right? Forbes Black does not come unless I'm going through San Antonio, and then from San Antonio, driving my car to Portland, Oregon, passing through Wyoming, getting a feel for how our country is outside of my own world, which again helped my perspective. And when you live in Oregon, right, this is statistics, since I'm not making this up, it's one of the whitest states in America. So here I am. I remember having a conversation with a white lady, and she came up to me. It was a very innocent question that turned into a very good dialogue. And she says, I don't have no disrespect, how does it feel being a black man living in Portland, living here? She hasn't seen too many. And so that was great. Here it is, I'm interacting, and I'm also learning what they're thinking because I had never been there before. So it opened up my world. Only a year from there, my price point kind of goes up because San Antonio says, hey, come on back, the San Antonio Express News. And I go back there, and my career really starts to evolve because now I'm comfortable. Now I say, okay, this paper asked me to come back. I'm home for a little bit. And you start to grow. I had been in San Antonio once before, so I know my way around. I'm not calling my aunt crying on the phone this time, right? I'm embracing it. And you get to kind of let your guard down, build, go through your, knucklehead moments but still build your career. And I tell people, at first I couldn't realize how big it was going to be. But San Antonio made me into the man. It grew me into the young man. I was a young man at that point. It grew me into a grown man. You go through so many life lessons, not only in your career, but outside of your career that, and because I'm outside of my comfort zone. And then throughout that process, you're seeing different editors at papers, and some of them you never even met, but they're watching you closely. Because now I know what it feels like not to have. I know what it feels like to be in North Philadelphia in the slums. I know what it feels like. I was around, during the financial crisis when I got laid off from one of my jobs, right, at a paper. And had to go back to that very same car dealership that I worked at in high school to ask for a job again. So now I'm working there twice, and that humbles you. So I know what it feels like. And so when you're down there now doing the very thing that you wanted to do, which is, man, I wanted to cover the NBA. I thought it was going to be the Sixers. You want to stay home, but it's better because now I'm around all of this wisdom in San Antonio, and you're collecting it. And, you're also learning how to be a journalist. You're learning how to develop sources. You're learning all the things that you have been talking about and studying up until this point. Now you got to go do it. Right. And so, through that, an editor saw that I was working and doing some great work. She, at that point, recommended me, and she DM'd me on Twitter at the time, now X. And she said, hey, CNBC has this sports business position open, and you want to come take it or interview for it? I'm like, oh, what do y'all, CNBC? That's the business channel. Like, what do you want from me? I don't want to do. Oh, okay. They want to go talk to the black guy. Okay, cool. And so I wanted to go through the interview because I wanted to see what it was about. And I tell you, Elena, I'm talking to them the same way I'm talking to you, right? More professional, and we're talking, but I did not know that they were going to come and offer me that position. And when I start getting calls, from friends of mine, they're calling and say, hey, CNBC is all asking about references. And one of those people, hate to always say it, but I have to say his name because it's Stephen A. He called me up because that was my mentor. Stephen A. Smith called me up, and I remember I was in Dallas. And he called me up and said, hey, man, CNBC called me. What's this all about? And I'm like, oh, man, Stephen A., they probably does. And he cusses me out. I mean, he really gets on me because I wasn't taking it seriously enough. Like, he saw potential in this opportunity. And here I am thinking like, man, I'm in San Antonio. I just broke one of the biggest stories in Spurs history. And I want to just see how this evolved. But I didn't know my time there was done. I didn't know that, but I needed my mentors to tell me that, like, man, no, this is a good opportunity. And I went to CNBC, and that allowed me to learn business. That was my, prerequisite to business. I did not know what certain terminology was. And then the pandemic happened. So now you're forced to sit home, nowhere to go, right? Nothing to do. When you go outside, you got to wear a mask. When you go outside, you may have to stand in a line to get in the market. We all remember that. But it forced me to say, all right, I know where I'm at, because in San Antonio, I had nothing to do because I didn't know where I was at. So I had to sit down and learn the job, learn the craft. And I did that. And, I'm doing this stuff at CNBC and loving it, Forbes calls me in May 2022 and expressing interest. And I'm like, what do y'all want? Y'all want to talk to the black guy? I go, right? But that turns into I cried when I left CNBC. That was a very hard decision because I loved that place. I was thriving there. It taught me business, but Forbes had this thing that they wanted me to do, but we didn't know what it was. And our chief content editor Randall Lane always likes to say, Forbes is a 100-year-old startup, and it really is, because you go in there one thing and you leave another. And I went over there as a sports business reporter, and when I was at CNBC, they had something called CNBC Make It Black, and I had really wanted to evolve that because I'm like, man, telling black stories in business and having CNBC on it, that'd be great, right? And I had started to see some traction because I was doing stories, and I noticed it was getting traction. I'd be making phone calls. Hey, man, I saw this one. I'm like, man, this has a lot of potential. But we didn't get a chance to grow it because Forbes had came, and they had another platform. And when when Randall Lane asked me, he says, hey, we have this platform and what do you want to do with it? And I'm like, well, don't throw it away, right? I think there's potential there because I had seen this work, and decided to call it Forbes BLK, branding and marketing. But people always say it's Forbes Black, but it's Forbes BLK is how you say it. But it is a platform now that's standing, and we started it in 2023, and it does everything that Forbes always does, which is cover business journalism, talk about entrepreneurs, and covers the things that matter when it comes to business and philanthropy. But it's just doing it through the black community lens. And there's a whole bunch of other outlets that tells great stories when it comes to black people in business, but none at the level of Forbes. I mean, Forbes is one of the most respected magazines in all of the world, and let alone business community. And I knew I made the right decision. I was at a lunch one day, and I had saw this commentator who was always coming on CNBC. I was a fan. I go up to him. I want to say his name. I says, hey, such, it's good to meet you. He said, oh, yeah. Where are you at now? I says, Forbes. It's a great decision. Like, what? I just left CNBC. Yeah. Right now, Elena, CNBC gives you private cars, right? They got their own private cafes. It's great over there, right? Like, I'm telling you, it's phenomenal. I'm like, man, I just left. Are you serious? Yeah. Absolutely. Why? Because it's written. And the written form, especially when a publication like a magazine, whole nother level of not scrutiny, but a level of detail that you have to go through with Forbes in a magazine, because it's an ink. Can't erase it. You can go online and change things, but there's a level of journalism that I hadn't experienced maybe since I was at the San Antonio Express News, where it has to be correct. Lawyers are calling you. There's fact checkers. There's everything. Like, there's a level of journalism behind Forbes people may not know, but it has to be that serious because this is a magazine. A lot of it's going into the magazine. And then if it's going on the website, you have to protect that 100-year-old startup, which has turned into this legacy brand. So you want to take those same pillars, that same respect, and you bring it to the Forbes BLK platform. And I think, we've done that. So far, we've had 2 business summits in Atlanta, and the platform has grown. We've told some phenomenal stories. We just put out our first list, which I think now was a part of the Forbes family when now is an official list out. And the feedback that, you get from the list was great. Of course, you see the celebrities on there, but you also see people like Chris Woolman, the CEO of a utility company, a whole bunch of other, individuals who are doing some very great things, both on the business side, both on the wealth side, and then both on the, impact side, nonprofits and what have you. So the platform is still very new, still going through its growing pains, but at the same time, I think we've cracked our own code into understanding how we can grow it, where it fits, improvements that need to be made. But for the most part, again, the platform is basically celebrating stories, Black individuals who are thriving in business, entrepreneurs who are doing other things that are different, nonprofits who are bringing true impact, and telling their stories on a Forbes level, hoping that can trickle down to the next entrepreneur, the next executive, the next individual who wants to start an impactful nonprofit. Because as you start this conversation off, when you see something, like I saw those individual sports fighters on television, and I'm saying, yeah, and why can I do that? When you want to be it, right? You have something to aim for. And I think in the Black community for too long, we've only been pushed towards sports, only been pushed towards entertainment, and not enough of it has been pushed towards private equity and real estate development and other areas, agriculture, farming, technology, other areas that you look at the richest people in the world. A lot of them didn't play sports or app. They did it a different way. So you just want to bring more of that to the light, because entertainment and sports, they're magnified enough. You want to bring other business stories, other unique perspectives to the light. And I think the way you do that for me is just by keeping in touch with the ordinary human being. The guy walking down the street may have a $1 billion idea. The only thing is you would never know it because you don't talk to him. But if you talk to him, you may see that he has it and it's in development. And it's a great story if it's accurate. The lawyers agree at Forbes. It's a good story to be told. And I think at that point, you find that other person across the street said, oh my God. And then it just trickles down. That's the way I use Forbes BLK, telling great stories and hope that the community shares it. And that word of mouth is what I rely on. Marketing, people push it out, but I rely on the word of mouth. Social media helps the distribution of it, but it's that word of mouth that I feel like has the best cachet, that gold. Because if you don't believe word of mouth is powerful, then why do people look at Yelp so much? You want to find out what the reviews say.
Oh, I read those reviews.
Yeah. And so that's what BLK is, that in a nutshell. Doing the same thing that Forbes does again, but just through the black lens.
And I think it's just so important to also highlight, to your point, like there's so many ways to be successful. And I think that, again, like in society today, we have so many highlights of what success might look like, and how, or being a star, like a sports star or a media personality. But there's so many other ways, like having a maintenance business, having, small and whatever it is, mom and pop shop. Like there's so many other ways to make money and be successful. And I think we forgot about all that, and we forgot about that. And everybody's trying to be, famous online, influencers. Do you know what I'm saying?
I read a story in the Wall Street Journal that the next wave of millionaires are going to be your electricians, your plumbers.
Yes.
The skills that people forgot. I was watching the Dave Chappelle monologue when he did Saturday Night Live, and he was talking about the immigrants in Ohio and how that town was just depleted of workers. But then you have these immigrants that come in and fulfill those jobs and nobody wanted. Same difference, right? I mean, we forgot. Car technicians, the same. I watch guys. I'm talking about technicians that made over $100,000 a year, fix Toyotas and master techs, right? And I think, there is an element of our society that's forgetting about those jobs, because we now know that we can pick up a phone and one viral video can make you a millionaire. And if it's that easy, then, who wants to clean oil out of buckets and take out trash anymore? Like, we forget the value of putting in that good old hard day's work, just so that way when you do earn those dollars in your life, you know how to take care of them and spend them. Because the number one sickness that we still have in this country, outside of the own issues of hate and all that, is financial literacy. A lot of people still don't know how to take care of money. And it took me a while to understand what 24% interest of credit card like. But too. But those same jobs, I mean, those are the areas. Again, the next wave of millionaires. Look where they at.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's completely underrated, and I think I would love to see more of that. And I think, again, with like a lot of recent graduates, like I interview so many cybersecurity graduates, and I'm like, that's wonderful, but it's like we don't even know if some of those jobs are going to be relevant. And there's so many, like it's like everybody jumps on a trend of like certain degrees, and then but we see this with I'm in tech, and with software developers, like they're not as popular, respectfully, as they used to be 10 years ago. You know what I'm saying? But to your point, some of those other jobs that
always going to be around. Always going to. You listen, on a hot summer day when you sitting up there doing a podcast because you're this big time influencer making all this money, what if your heat goes out or your air conditioner goes out? Who you calling? So I mean, and if it's the right day and the right time, that individual you call got you over the side. You can ask whatever you want. Otherwise, you're not getting your air conditioner fixed. So I think, those jobs we do forget about, because we think technology is going to fix it all, but no, it's not.
Yeah, and I like the point you said about the financial piece. My dad always used to say also that you have to be ready for money.
Yes.
If you're not ready for it, it's going to be disastrous. And I really, and I always, like, when I think about things, I'm like, I don't aim, and I don't know if it's even good to even say that, but like I don't aim for like the richest of the world. I just want to have the freedom to do what I want, when I want, how I want to do it. So whatever allows me to be financially stable, to be able to do that, right? Like to continue to do that now. But like It's terrifying to think about.
Well, it's to your point. Uh, Speaking in the Toyota dealership, because I hit the lottery.
Mhm.
When I told you tell this story in public, I hit the lottery at the Toyota dealership I was working at, and I wasn't necessarily ready for the money,
Yeah.
right? And here it is, you walk away with maybe $60,000, right? I'll get into the longer details another day,
Ah.
but I had split it with a friend of mine. We had both won,
Mhm.
and I $60,000 to a 20-something-year-old at
Yeah.
that point. It's like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
I'm rich,
Yeah.
and so I bought an Infinity
Of course you
car,
did.
right? And the one thing that I did that I think was smart is that I put a little bit of the money in mutual funds. I had no
Mm.
idea what the hell mutual funds was, but I said, all right, cool, I'm gonna save it. And I end up taking those same mutual funds out and putting a down payment on the first house.
Mhm.
So it all kind of worked out, but I wish I go back to that very time. I said, man, if I known what I
Mhm.
knew today about that 60 grand, oh man,
Mhm.
but I wasn't ready.
You gotta be ready for it. You mentioned a couple, like you mentioned a mentor. What are some? How have mentors played a role, and how do you find
Huge.
mentor? That's a big question people ask me all the time. Like, how do you find mentors? Like, how do you come? How do you become a mentor material, right? Like mentee material? Because I think that's another thing. It's like people think mentorship is like, oh, somebody's gonna come and show you the way and let you do all the thing. But there's also a relationship piece to it. It's a two-way street.
Yeah.
It's not a way and one-way street. So, what are some tips for people that are looking for mentors?
Be in college. It's the easy way to get a yes. When you're a student, you're non-threatening,
Yeah.
right? It's harder when you're a professional and you're trying to get a mentor
Mm-hmm.
because professionals, and as you get to be an older adult, you get stuck in your ways. And
Oh.
so when you're a mentee and a mentor, my mentors, I was open to constructive criticism. I wanted to hear it. I needed to hear it. I wanted to know what I could have done better. And I embraced again when my mentors called me up and told me some stuff about me that I didn't want to hear. I maybe didn't want to hear, but it was good for me. And you got to be able to accept that because they're doing it because they're trying to see you thrive. I don't think you're a good mentor if you're calling and you're giving people all the good advice all the time. Like then you're just feeding their ego. And so I wanted to learn. I wanted to be coachable. I'm still a student of this craft. And I feel like I took that same approach into finding mentors. I let them know I don't know everything. I'm just trying to learn. I, we were at the event, giving them thank you cards, calling
Mm-hmm.
them up and letting them know I'm a human being, but letting them know we could do this when you have the time because I know you're the busy individual. I'm trying to get some of your time, so let me know. I will make it work around 5 o'clock at night. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
5 o'clock in the morning, I'm there. Right?
Mhm.
Where? New York. I'll drive up.
Mhm.
I wanted to be there because I wanted that time. I wanted that wisdom. And if I couldn't, meet them in person back in the day, I would just record the call so I can go and listen to the audio and take notes about what they said back at that time. So for me, it's just about being humble, going up to an individual, letting them know who you are, introducing yourself, letting them know what you're trying to do, and asking them for their help and asking them for their perspective, and asking them to, teach you, and being open to that. And also, not only asking them for things, but also realizing when it's your turn to, you know, be the person that says yes and
Mhm.
calling them up and, saying, happy birthday or happy Father's Day or happy Mother's Day or happy Thanksgiving if it's all that stuff. That stuff matters to people.
Mhm.
And you notice I didn't say text, call,
Mm.
it's more personal. And I think doing that, you build up enough mentors and they become your friends. But that's the way I approached it. I would call people who I admired, and if they knew somebody that I admired, say, hey, can you introduce me to that person? I would really love to meet them. And it got to a point where I had so many of them, people start telling me no. Like, man, you got enough mentors. I'm not going to be your mentor. And I find myself today saying no to some people because I know now, like, we're in a whole different uh, age and a whole different era. Not everybody can handle constructive criticism
Mm.
because we're in a little bit more sensitive environment. And that may be beneficial to us because now we understand that we can't go around saying anything. We got to be more cautious of people's feelings. But also, I say no because it does involve a layer of time, as you said, relationship building. I don't have the time to put the constructive criticism in or to talk to or have a lot of students as I'm mentoring because I have an 11-year-old daughter too. She's going,
Yeah.
Dad, what about me? So I think it's a mixture. You have to make sure that when somebody's asking you to be a mentor, that you can give that time and let them know from the very beginning, listen,
Mhm.
it's going to be constructive criticism. It's going to be this, that, and the other, because I want to see you win. And this is how people taught me,
Mhm.
right? I'm only teaching you how they taught me. And then you have to pass it on. It's the only promise I made to them is that you pass it on. You play it forward. And so, like I said, being humble and not thinking that you know it all.
Mhm.
Going asking for help as opposing to just trying to be in somebody's space just to be there. I think most times when you see a lot of young kids, when I go to a lot of journalism events, they'll see the media stars of the world, people who you see on the television, and the only thing they want to do is take a
Yeah.
selfie and a photo instead of saying, put the phone down and asking them for information. Hey, when you wrote that story, what was going through your mind?
Yeah.
Trying to pick up as many jewels as possible, right? So that way you can take that information, ingest it into what you're trying to do, and then when it has to flow back out, you have something to tap into, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then you can use that information and pay it forward. But again, it is a level of relationship, it's a level of time, it's a level of dropping your ego, dropping your pride, asking for help, not being afraid to go up to somebody to introduce yourself. If you see them right there at the coffee shop,
Mhm.
that's the universe speaking to you right there.
Mhm.
You got to go for it. And a lot of times, I always have a saying: closed mouths don't get fed. You
Mhm.
got to ask for what you want, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't ask, and
Yeah.
so they don't get.
I mean, what's the worst that will happen? That's what I always ask myself. I'm like, what's the worst that will happen? They'll say no, they'll ignore me. Cool. Like,
Absolutely,
it's fine.
yeah.
Yeah, it's this whole idea of just being able to communicate and ask good questions. Again, like only when I started running my podcast, and I would say it's like the biggest education for myself because I got better. And I mean, you went back as early as like 2020. So even just like asking the better questions, like I'm still learning every conversation.
Yeah.
Like every conversation, I walk away and I'm like, oh, I should have asked this, you know what I mean? So that's how kind of I learn. But it's just the ability to ask questions, which I think is a lot of young people miss these days, or
Mhm.
they're afraid, or it's like to your point, like if you don't ask, you're
Yeah.
just blocking yourself from potential blessings or whatever, or just opportunities to learn. And I think that feedback is a privilege.
Mhm.
I really see it as that. I think it's I mean, imagine like if nobody gave you feedback throughout your life, like you know what I mean? You just be the same. I mean, that's an awful way to live. So when
Yeah.
people are not open to constructive criticism or even just criticism, like take something from it. Like, I mean, take it or leave, but take something from it. Don't internalize it. But there's always a learning opportunity in everything.
Yeah. And like I said, most people I found, it's a big world. I haven't met everyone. But some people aren't open as they think they are to constructive criticism. Now
Mm,
that doesn't mean you got to go around being cruel all the time,
mm-hmm,
but there are times where the hard realities have to happen. Uh, no, it wasn't a good idea. No, you shouldn't have done it. I'll tell you
mm-hmm,
why, right? And them taking that, but also them knowing when not to use it, the constructive criticism. Interpret it, right? Don't get
mm-hmm.
mad that you heard it, but you may have I'm reading Warren Buffett's biography or autobiography right now. It's very interesting. But I've learned at his time when he was investing earlier in his life, he got to a point where he just stopped listening to people because he realized that he had collected enough knowledge where I'm going to do it how I want to do it now. I
Mm-hmm.
don't need to go by your philosophy. And I'm like starting to
It's a good point.
interpret that like
Mm-hmm,
maybe I don't need to call my mentors as much as I think I do anymore
mm-hmm.
because I got it. I have my
Yeah.
own way of doing it now. And it really hit me because one of my mentors not too long ago called me and asked me for advice. And I'm like, this is weird. Like, this is really weird. But that's when you kind of realize, like, hey, you know what? I'm at a point where I can trust my instincts now.
Mm-hmm.
I can trust, I can trust my 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
Malcolm Gladwell. Like, I can trust that I put it in. Because, listen, this is the shift, right? You're always going to have your doubts about yourself. You're always going to have your insecurities. But then you got to tap into your experience that you built over all of that time to realize, like, okay, I could do this. I
Mm-hmm.
can. I've done it before. Just in a different way, but I've done it. And kind of go from there.
Mm. Jabari, it's been I could speak to you for hours, but I'm mindful of your time, and I want to ask you a last question that I
Yeah.
ask all of my guests. What is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
One question that people should ask themselves more often: are they truly interdependent?
Tell me more.
What does that mean? We don't have
Yes.
time. I
No, no, I
thought.
have time, but I want you to elaborate.
You know, interdependence is it's a good trait to have as not only a leader but as you grow through your career, your professional life, and your personal life. Think about when we're born as kids. We are dependents. On
Mhm.
your taxes, it says, how many dependents do you have? How many
Mhm.
people do you take care of that are dependent on you? And our kids are dependent on us. But then an interesting thing happens. Even when a baby starts to learn to walk, right? The baby's picking up their own form of independence, right? Try to pick a baby up when he knows how to walk, or she. What are they going to do? Start crying. Put me down. I know how to do this now. I'm independent,
Mhm.
right? And that independence is the hardest thing in the world to have to trade in when you're trying to reach interdependence. Because interdependence says that you cannot go to level B without the people who came with you with level A. You gotta wait for them. You gotta go together. You can't make a decision about buying that new car if you're married without talking to your wife first, because 9 times out of 10, or your husband, because 9 times out of 10, your spouse is gonna drive the car, so you want to make sure they like the color and everything. Interdependence, right? Y'all doing it
Mhm.
together. You're doing it as a team, right? I can't put out a Forbes BLK list. I can't run a Forbes BLK platform without a great team that I'm working with. I may have to make a final decision here or there, but I'm looking for feedback. Hey, would you do that? What did you think? Right? That interdependence. And a lot of times we may think we're interdependent, right? We
Mhm.
may think that, but that independence still comes out because it gets back to I,
Mhm.
not we, we. And I learned the word we when I was reading Jim Collins's book, Good to Great, how great CEOs learn how to interpret and learn how to substitute I for we. I didn't do it. We did that. It makes people feel empowered. It makes people feel like they belong. It makes people feel like they're appreciated. And it takes interdependence to think and to do that. And interpreting and knowing and understanding what interdependence is, what it means, and how you have to drop your independence in order to be interdependent. So are you truly interdependent?
Mm.
Because if you're not, it could be hurting you.
Mm. Very powerful message, especially in a world where we're so individualized. So
Yes.
it's beautiful reminder for us all. Thank you, Jabari.
Elena, thank you for having me.